Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Mark Ruegg. Mark is a healing advocate and the creator of the Healing Recipe, a simple belief-centered framework focused on helping the body feel safe so it can heal. After being diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic neuroendocrine carcinoma and told he had months to live, Mark took an integrative approach, combining conventional treatment with meditation, lifestyle changes, and a deep focus on mindset and belief. Today, he is living with no evidence of disease. With more than 20 years working as a professional child wrangler in the entertainment industry, Mark developed a unique ability to break down complex ideas into simple, practical steps. He now shares what he's learned to help others move from fear to hope and understand how healing can begin. Mark, welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast. I've been looking forward to our conversation for quite a while now.
Dave, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to share my story with your guests. Let's get started.
Okay, before we get started, I got to clear up any possible misconceptions about an item in your bio. We talked about this prior to recording. What in the world is a child wrangler?
Yes, and I always tell people, I've been doing it for over 20 years. My family still has no clue, and they think I'm a high-priced babysitter in Los Angeles, but I direct children on sets for commercials and print ads. So basically, they hire a child wrangler like myself because on commercials and print, they bring in these kids so fast. They shoot their scenes, and the director, the photographer doesn't have a chance to really get to meet them. So I get to meet them off set. I create a rapport with them. And then when we're on set in front of a lot of people, a lot of set pieces, and the kid might be a little nervous, they already have some sort of relationship with me, and I can kind of direct them, give them the information they need, and that's it. Who would have thunk you could make a career out of that? But in Hollywood, you can pretty much do anything.
Yeah, Hollywood, pretty much anything goes from what I understand. So, but you have an incredible story. Before we get into that, we have to give a shout out to Candace Snyder. I know you've been on Candace's wonderful podcast, Passion, Purpose, and Possibilities. After she interviewed you, she emailed me and said, boy, have I got a guest for you. She told me your story, and it took me about probably a little bit under 2 seconds to email her back and say, yeah, hook me up with Mark. And she did, and we find ourselves recording what I know is going to be an impactful episode for my audience. But Candace is just one of these beautiful souls. She's a dear friend. She's been very supportive of my podcast, and we kind of have like a mutual support network. I'll refer guests to her, but she's just part of this great community of podcasters who really have one thing in mind, and they want to feature really great stories for the betterment of those who are listening to it and to improve the quality of lives of others. And I can align with that message and with Candace all day long. So
Yeah, she was great. And I met her through a mutual friend of ours, Harriet, who I ended up doing a yoga retreat with in Bali. I would have never done a yoga retreat in a million years, but after I got sick, what we'll talk about later, I'm a whole new person.
Well, yeah, and it's just incredible because when I first read about your diagnosis, I said, on any other day, this is a definite death sentence. I don't know too many pancreatic cancer survivors, and particularly that have gone in total remission for over 2 years. So tell our audience about your cancer journey and how you overcame the impossible odds to become a stage 4 cancer thriver today.
So Dave, I mean, it really started about 2 years ago. And I always tell this story how my wife and I were on this vacation in Lake Havasu. And it was one of those vacations where everything was going right. The weather was right. The lake was right. And we're driving home. We're celebrating. We're holding hands. We're singing along to the radio. We're planning our retirement. Life was good. And literally 1 week later, I'm in the emergency room with this pain in my right side. And they ran a bunch of tests and they did a CT, but they didn't do contrast. So everything was showing up pretty good. They did find a very large kidney stone on my opposite side, and that became the shiny object. So they were like, okay, well, we got to figure this out. And they scheduled an operation, but weeks go by. When the kidney stone was out, I'm not getting any better. I'm getting worse. And I think the scariest part of the whole thing was the weight loss. I went from about 175 pounds down to about 130 in a matter of a few months. And so just being scared, being nervous, I'm looking in the mirror. I'm not even recognizing myself. So I find a GI and he orders more tests. And this time they did an MRI with dye, and that's when they found it. And it was a 4 centimeter tumor in the head of my pancreas. And it had spread to my lymph nodes and my liver. And that first oncologist basically gave me 4 to 6 months to live. And that was a gut punch. I mean, I'm going from this vacation where life is so good to just a few weeks later, they're telling me that I'm dying. It was so surreal, Dave. I had a very rare type of pancreatic cancer. It's called a neuroendocrine carcinoma, which is high grade and very aggressive. And a lot of times it gets misconstrued with a neuroendocrine tumor, an NET, which is exactly what Steve Jobs had. And with a neuroendocrine tumor, it's a little slower growing. There's more ways that they can fight it. But with this neuroendocrine carcinoma, like I said, it was high grade, it was fast moving. In fact, they do a test called a Ki-67, and it basically tests how fast your tumor is multiplying and growing. And typically for like an NET, that would have been around 30-40%. Mine was a greater than 90%. So it was growing very, very fast, hence why they gave me such a short amount of time. And I found a specialist, but even my specialist was telling me that I'm inoperable, that I'm incurable, and that I'm terminal. And that the best case scenario is that they were going to attack it with 2 different chemos and an immunotherapy so that we could hopefully stabilize this for as long as possible. And that was all I was given. And Dave, you don't know, they rush into things. So I said yes to the chemo, and we do my first round, and I'm on my couch recovering from this first round of 2 different chemos and an immunotherapy. And I'm just scrolling through my emails. And somebody on there sends me this documentary called Heal. And I watched this documentary, and there's people on there like Dr. Joe Dispenza, Anita Morjani, Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, and they're all talking about healing and possibilities. And all of a sudden, Dave, I feel like I'm standing between these 2 worlds. I have this Western medicine world with my specialist and my cancer support group, and they're all saying you're dying. And then over here, I got people talking about healing, talking about possibility, curing. And I remember I told my wife, I said, babe, if I got 6 months to live, I'm jumping over here. Then I dove in head first, Dave. And I think I've read more books in the last 2.5 years than I think I've read in my entire life. And what I've learned is healing is possible. And not only is it possible, there's a recipe for it. And that's what I'm out there trying to share this information and knowledge with.
Yeah, that's incredible. But I know there other individuals have integrated Eastern and Western medicine to improve the quality of life and to cure illness. The other thing is there's individuals that just with who are in an advanced state of meditation, who did really highly evolved meditation practices, were able to use the inner life from their body to cure whatever was going on inside. And I'm sure you're familiar with the late Louise Hay from Hay Publishing.
Totally.
She was diagnosed, I think, with stage 4, it might have been ovarian cancer, I think. A doctor wanted to do, like with your doctor, typical chemotherapy, radiation. She said, no, I'm going to meditate and I'm going to cure my cancer on my own. And she did. And she stayed in remission.
Well, and what I've learned, Dave, is really our bodies cannot heal in a state of stress.
No.
When we're in fight and flight, those healing mechanisms, they turned way down. And the only way you start to boost that up is you got to get your body back into a state of calm, back into feeling safe. I mean, I think we're the only animals on the planet that can sit there and preconceive the threat in our brain. Like animals in the wilderness, they are attacked. They have that fight and flight system. But when the threat is over, they go back to grazing. Their body is relaxed again. We, on the other hand, we stay in that stress mode. We keep reliving over and over again. Well, what if? Why? And I became a big meditator. And what I believe meditation did for me is it allowed me to get out of the shoulda, woulda, couldas of the past, the what ifs and maybes of the future, and really sit into the magic of the present moment. And when we're present and we're calm, that's when the body starts to realign, starts to go back into homeostasis. And that's when healing is able to actually begin.
Yeah. And there's a lot to be said for incorporating a regular meditation practice in terms of improving well-being, improving clarity, improving intuition, and also improving longevity as well. So, and you mentioned in our pre-call about a very transformative experience that you had during meditation, which contributed to your recovery. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that, Mark?
Okay. And I always have to be careful who I'm talking to when I'm sharing these things, because some people are like, "Wow, he's nuts." But this is the honest to God truth, Dave. This is exactly how it happened. Yeah. So basically, like I told you, I saw that documentary Heal. I'm seeing these people. And one of those people I mentioned was Dr. Joe Dispenza. And so I went on Dr. Joe Dispenza's website, and on there, he has all these stories of transformation. And there are people telling these amazing stories of healing. And I remember I'm talking to my wife. I said, look, I said, these people aren't selling anything. They don't work for Joe. You can tell they're speaking their truth. And so I'm looking and I'm trying to find out. And there was a meditation that a lot of people who claim they healed from cancer did, was this Blessings of the Energy Centers. And I just download it. And with it comes this little instruction. And basically, the energy centers that Dr. Joe uses are the same ones that yogis use about chakras. And in each one of these energy zones, we hold and we store energy from trauma, from a lot of stuff. And we need to learn to release it and bring new energy in. And so I was not a meditator before. I was not a yogi. All of this is new to me, but your life is on the line. You're going to try a little bit of anything and everything. And so we started to make this a regimen. My wife and I would meditate, this Blessings of the Energy Centers, and we were doing it 2 hours a day. We would do it first thing in the morning and last thing before bed. And this became our ritual. And we did it for about a month. And about a month in, Dave, I'm doing that meditation and I start vibrating. My whole body is vibrating. And it's not just like little tingling sensations. I'm vibrating like a fish out of water. Like my body is convulsing and I don't have zero control, but I'm not scared. I'm not worried. It's not like I'm going into this epileptic fit or something. I just allowed it to happen. And we finished the meditation and my wife is like, what was that? And I'm like, I have no idea. I said, but I just went with it. And so we go to bed, and around 3 o'clock in that morning, I woke up with what I describe as an explosion out my spine. It was loud, it hurt. I woke up, I screamed, I woke my wife up, and she's like, "What's going on?" And I said, "Something exploded out my spine." I said, "I saw the brightest light I've ever seen in my life." And she's like, "Mark, you're dreaming." And I said, "Babe, if I'm dreaming, it's the most realistic dream I've ever had in my life." And we talked about it for a little bit more, and we go back to bed. And I was already scheduled for a PET scan about 2 weeks from then. And I go in and I have my PET scan, Dave, and I kid you not, there is no more tumor in my pancreas. It was gone. And I've had multiple CTs and MRIs since then, and every single one has been no evidence of disease.
That's incredible. What was the reaction of your doctor when he saw no evidence of disease?
That's a whole another story. So basically, I go in and they just the scan's messed up. It's small. It's minuscule. It's just not the scans just aren't picking it up. So they did not believe that anything was happening. They believed that there was shrinkage, that something must have happened, but there was no way that this thing could be gone. In fact, when my tumor was first arrived, it was pressing up against my bile duct. And they ended up having to put a metal stent in because it was making me go jaundice. So they put a metal stent in. The problem with the metal stent is that my body rejected the metal. So I ended up with an infection, 104-degree fever. I'm back in the hospital. They had to replace the metal one now with a plastic one. The problem with the plastic one was that they were going to have to replace that every 3 months. And that was going to be my life. And, the scans are looking good. I'm feeling better. And so I go in to have this replaced, and I'm like, "Doc," I'm like, "what are the odds of you just taking this out? Have you seen my scans?" And he's like, "Mark, I'm sorry. It's just not our protocol. I know it's not showing up on the scans, but I'm pretty sure it's still there." He goes, "And we got to be prepared for when this starts to grow again." So I'm like, "Okay." And he goes, "But I'll tell you what I'm going to do." He goes, "I got to go in anyways." He goes, "I'm going to look around. I'm sure I can find it. I'll measure it. I'll make notes about it, and we can talk about this next time." And I'm like, "Okay." And he puts me under, and I come to, and I kid you not, this doctor who's the head of this department at Cedars in Beverly Hills, my entire oncology team says they work there because of this man. So he must have seen it all. He is dancing around like a kid in a candy store. He is telling everybody, he's like, "It's a miracle. It's a miracle. He's a miracle." He's like, "I have never in the course of my career seen a tumor disappear from the pancreas in my life." And he never put that stent back in. And Dave, if it was just me, I would chalk this up as a miracle. I would thank God and I would be on my way. But I have since talked to so many cancer patients, people who were told they couldn't and wouldn't survive, who are not only alive today, but they are thriving. And each and every one of them has done a version of this recipe that I talk about. So it's possible. I know it.
Yeah, and like I said, there's precedent before with Louise Hay, and there's been other individuals you mentioned. Bruce Lipton, he was the author of The Biology of Belief. Anita Moorjani had a very well documented and well publicized near-death experience. So you're talking Joe Dispenza. So you're talking about individuals who have, you know, who have not disowned Western medicine, but are saying, look, there's other alternatives in addition to, or in combination with, that we can explore. And I've always believed what Western medicine can address, Eastern medicine can, and vice versa. And together, that combination is to me a very powerful, very synergistic combination for promoting overall well-being and healing.
No, totally. And it's so funny because I talk to a lot of people and they think that I'm against Western meds, and I'm not at all. I think it did exactly what it said
Mm.
it was going to do. It stabilized the growth. And that stabilizing the growth allowed me to adopt and add in some of these other holistic practices. It was meditation, it was spirituality. I mean, my whole 7 ingredients in my healing recipe is belief, meditation, spirituality, increased positivity, decreased stress, diet, and exercise. And when I started to combine all of these together, started to make it a daily habit and focused on these things, my body, like I said, started to feel calm again, started to feel safe, started to go back into balance. And then when I lower that inflammation, I boost my immune system, the body does what it's naturally programmed to do, which is heal. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what I believe happened to me.
Yeah, and I know you write a lot about that the recipe on your healing recipe publication on Substack. But let's just get into that for a second. How long have you had the healing recipe publication on Substack? How do you present the information that your recipe in a way that's relatable, that encourages conversation? And finally, what do you want individuals to take away from what you write?
It's interesting, Dave, because like I said, it's been about 2.5 years. And my first year was all about me. I went into this healing bubble, I like to call it. And I spent a full time, like of focusing on this healing recipe. I mean, it was a full-time job. I mean, when I talk about my diet, I was juicing about 32 to 64 ounces of vegetable juice a day. And on top of that, I was having these 2 large salads. So just between those and going back and forth to the produce section, cleaning the juicer, and then I was meditating. On top of that, I was trying to walk and get some exercise in. It became a full-time job. So this healing bubble was literally my focus for the first year. But then everything was happening, everything was good. And then last year was all about understanding what I did and how I did it. And so I was just trying to accumulate knowledge and information, and I'm still reading and trying to understand exactly what I did so I can kind of phrase it in a biological, scientific way that it's not just all woo woo. That yes, people call it woo woo, but when you start to get into the science of it, you start to understand that you know what? This stuff really does make sense. And then nowadays, this I'm going into my 3rd year and I'm just now starting to get loud, starting to share, starting to get on people's podcasts, write my healing recipe, this information, just small little snippets so people can start to understand that healing is possible. And at first, I was giving everyone, I think, too much. When you're diagnosed and you're in that fight and flight fear mode, giving you all this information does not help because it doesn't even compute. You're not taking any of it in. All you are focusing on is the enemy at hand. So basically, what I need to do is, and what I try to do is get people in a state of belief first.
Mm.
Because I say belief is the dough of the pizza. Without the belief, you can have all these other ingredients, but none of them are going to stick. So you have to have this belief that healing is even possible for you.
Mhm.
And I have this story that I like to tell about when I was first diagnosed, when I left. I am the youngest of 10. I have 7 brothers, 2 sisters, and I'm calling all of them. And I'm like, this is insane. I'm like, you got to find me the best of the best. I will go anywhere. I'll do anything. I want to live. And less than 24 hours later, Dave, I get a call from this guy named Roger Magowitz from the Sina Magowitz Foundation, this pancreatic cancer organization. And he's like, Mark, it's Roger. I talked to your sister-in-law last night. She told me what that doctor said. And I just want you to know that he doesn't know what he's talking about. I'll put you in touch with a 5, 10, 15, 25-year survivor. Who do you want to talk to? And in that moment, my belief started to change. I went from believing I was going to die to the possibility that I could survive, that I could heal. That's what I needed. And I borrowed his belief, because when we are weakened, when we're given a diagnosis, our belief isn't strong enough. So you have to borrow someone else's so that you stand on theirs and you keep using theirs for strength until yours becomes strong enough.
Yeah.
But belief is so important. So if you don't have it in the beginning, you borrow someone else's. But then I always tell people, a belief is just a thought you think over and over again. So you want to change that belief? You change your thoughts. You change the words you speak about yourself. I had this mantra that I would say over and over and over again. I am strong. I am powerful. I am healthy. I am healed. And I would say this over and over again. First thing I did when I woke up, last thing before bed. And the more you start thinking it, the more you start to believe it. And the more that I believed it, the more I was able to become it.
Our behavior is dictated by our beliefs. And I was saying this, I think, on another podcast, is that when we buy into a narrative, that narrative is programmed into our brain. We automatically respond to that very unconsciously with the behavior that reinforces that narrative. And looking initially what you were told, you went from having a wonderful vacation with your wife, living your best life, and all of a sudden you find out that you have 4 to 6 months to live. And to me, that just illustrates that we really need to not take any day for granted, because life can change on a dime. But the fact is, you chose not to buy into that, and you chose to borrow from other people's hope through, the Sina Magowitz Foundation. And then again, you found your own hope. And there's a lot to be said, I think, for mindset and resisting diagnosis. I think mindset for cancer patients can at least minimally improve quality of life and outcomes. But in your case, you basically use that diagnosis to find some different methods, and particularly through the power of our using our own healing energy through meditation to heal yourself. And I know you said in the beginning, you said, geez, I know a lot of people are going to think this like I sound crazy. Well, I know you don't sound crazy, because there's been documentation of the fact that the way we think influences how we feel. One of the first books that I ever read on the subject was Permanent Healing by Dan Condren. He's a physician who talked about how our thinking impacts the specific type of physical ailment, what the specific thought is, and how we can modify the thought, and the root cause of that thought. And this is another thing I think that Eastern medicine gets to very well. It's functional medicine. It gets to the root causes of any particular ailment, particularly the beliefs that you have explored, or that you've subscribed in, that are contributing to your perception of treatment and your perception of outcome. So Dan Condren was one of the first to write about this. Louise Hayes, as I mentioned earlier, she cured her own cancer through the use of the inner light healing meditation. You did the same. And it had a very powerful transformative impact on your body. So you look at this, and there are certain things that happen that defy a scientific explanation, but does it mean they didn't happen? No. And as my friend said, sometimes we just got to behold the magic that's in the universe. I'm a firm believer. We don't throw Western medicine out the window, but in conjunction with Western medicine, any other type of complementary strategies, modifying our beliefs, meditation, all that you've done can, I think, improve quality of life and promote cures. You're right about stress. Stress compromises our immune system, and it contributes to the proliferation of disease and the prolongingness of disease. So, like I said, man, you're preaching to the choir, because I believe in all of this. I'm very science-based. There's room for science, but there's also room for other non-scientific perspectives to explain how we see the world, and explain and also contribute to positive healthcare and psychological well-being outcomes. So you're good with me.
Well, good. And one of the things that my wife and I did right when I got diagnosed was we turned off the news. Well, I have not listened to the news since September of 23. And it's not that we put our heads in the sand. We know what's going on, but that constant influx of just fear and mongling, and we don't even know it. You know, 2.5 years ago, if you would have asked me if I'm stressed, I would have been like, Dave, I'm the least stressed person that you know. Now, 2.5 years later, really working on de-stressing, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was stressed.
Mm.
And there's so much information that we take in subconsciously that we're not even aware of. So turning off the news and then replacing that with love and joy. I think we've gone through the entire comedy lineup on Netflix, and we spent our time just laughing, enjoying, getting back to what life is really about, taking vacations, being in nature. All of this stuff, it really starts to recalibrate our bodies and our insides. And I think that contributes a lot to not only healing, but to being well.
Yeah. And I wonder if all of the positive things that you and your wife expose yourself to, if that doesn't positively alter cell structure. And
Totally. I think so.
I think I was in one of my classes today with a guest speaker, and she was talking about a study that a scientist did where water, because we're 80%, our body's 80% water, where he would talk, he would say different types of positive things to the water or negative things. And the pictures that you showed, the difference in molecular structure, telling. You could see the molecular structure being more in alignment, more healthy with positivity, and more disjointed, more fragmented, more unhealthy when negativity was introduced.
I'm learning all about epigenetics. I'm not a scientist, but the more I learn, the more we can turn on and off these genes through our emotions, through our thoughts, between our inner being, and knowing that changes everything. Doctors mean well, and I know they mean no harm. But it really does upset me a little bit when they start to give these prognoses of timetables, because for most, it really gets embedded into their head. And unfortunately, it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mm.
I've known way too many friends now who are gone because they couldn't overcome that diagnosis that doctor gave them. And I remember when I was in the thick of it, I would tell my wife, sometimes you just got to be a little delusional, because I was going to allow, if I was delusional and I died, it didn't matter. I was going to die happy. I was going to die with a smile on my face. At least I was going to go out that way. But by changing everything, I'm still here. So yeah, I think there's something to be said for a little delusion in our lives.
Or refusing to buy into conventional wisdom, or to refusing to buy into what you hear. And too often, I think our histories dictate that, where we feel disempowered because of circumstances that have happened, prior, whether it was unhealthy family dynamics, it was a variety or other things that may have contributed to that feeling of disempowerment, or the feeling that we didn't have a voice or a say in any matter. But, you mentioned epigenetics. You look at generational trauma, you can pass down the rules of one unhealthy generation to another without altering the genetic code. And if those rules aren't modified at some level of that family tree, it's going to, the families are going to fall in line with those unhealthy rules. If that's changed and the mindset's changed, future generations are going to act in a way that's more proactive, more pro-social, and less unhealthy.
Yeah. And unfortunately right now, I just read an article that colon cancer right now is the leading death for young people, for people under the age of 50. And there's so much to be said, and nobody knows exactly what. But it's colon cancer, it's colorectal cancer, and I'm talking to 3 different families now with kids under the age of 23 that are suffering from this. So I think there's a lot to do with the toxins in our food system, the toxins in our environment, the toxins in our brain. These kids they've been brought up with this phone. They know everything and anything that's going on around the world 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I really just don't think that our systems were built to bring all that in. And I'm not saying that the 7-year-old is figuring out what's happening over in Haiti, but they know what's happening in their class.
Yeah.
They know if someone's talking about them, and that becomes stressful to them.
Yeah.
And you add that on with these ingredients in the food. I mean, if you go back to the 70s and you take the exact same product, that ingredient was like this big. Now on the same box, it's this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. And a lot of times these young adults are getting their news on social media, and there's so many misinformation bots, so many misinformation sites, and that becomes more overwhelming and more confusing, not just for young adults, but for anybody that really
Right?
follows any type of news source, or mainstream news, and think that they're going to get the total picture, because no one news station gives you the total picture.
Right.
You have left us with so much good stuff today, Mark. So much. I've got a couple of more questions for you, and then I am going to let you enjoy the rest of your day. And you're in California, am I correct?
You are
Yeah.
correct. Yes, and
Yeah.
the sun is shining. It's a pretty day out. So yes, and it's Good Friday. So we'll go have a good Friday.
There you, and I've already had a good Friday talking with you. So,
Oh,
but one of my questions for you is that if you're going to leave our listeners with one ultimate takeaway today, Mark, what would that be?
you know, so many things, but to be honest, what I truly believe and why I'm still here is there's something about finding the direction in the stillness. I tell people all the time, when I got still, when I got quiet, when I actually surrendered, I started to be led. And I have a lot of friends, they're atheists. This doesn't have to be about God, but I call it God, but others call it universe, all knowing source. But I said, if you want to down to the nitty gritty, you don't want to believe in all of that. Do you believe in intuition? That thing that lives inside of you that keeps you driving on the right side of the road, that thing that pulls you back off the side of the edge of the cliff, that thing inside of us that wants to keep us alive. It's intelligent, it's all knowing, and we can get in touch with it, but we're never going to get in touch with it through distraction, through scrolling, through worry, through fear. The only way is through stillness and quiet. And that's what meditation did. But when you get still and when you get quiet, there's something that you can connect with. And when I was really, really sick, when I just got diagnosed, I came home and I was so distraught. And my wife's upstairs and I'm just praying. And I'm asking for help, for guidance, for support. And this message came in so loud, so clear. It was talk less, listen more. It was the first thing I wrote in my journal. I've kept a journal this whole time. And that's exactly what I still do. And I've surrendered to the greater good. I stop worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow. I have so many people that are naysayers and they're like, Mark, it's coming back. What are you going to do when it comes back? Well, I don't worry about when it comes back or if it comes back. And if it does, we'll deal with it then. But right now, I'm alive. Right now, I have my wife. I have a roof over my head. I feel good. So I'm just going to sit in the present moment. And then every morning, Dave, I wake up and it's like I pick up a new breadcrumb. And it's like, okay, where are we going today? And just allowing myself to be led, I have been seeing and doing the most remarkable and incredible things. So if I can share anything, it's get quiet, find some space, and get in touch with that inner self, God, source, universe, intuition, consciousness, whatever it is that you relate with. Talk to it and ask for guidance, and then trust it and allow it to actually guide you where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for sitting in the quiet. It stills our mind. It allows us to get in touch with our inner voice. And I've always told anybody who will listen to me is that you know yourself better than anybody. That inner voice will guide you if you trust it, if you let it. Allow that to manifest so that the vision that you see for the reality you want to create or co-create becomes, becomes real.
Yeah, totally. And I tell everybody, I don't think my miracle was I was healed. I think the miracle was being led on this path
Yeah.
and then learning from this path so then I can take and share and teach and guide others.
Yeah. And, we're always going to be in a state of learning. I tell my students within every great student is a great teacher, and hopefully within every great teacher is a great student. But, you mentioned walking on the path, and reminds me of my favorite Ram Dass teaching is we're all just walking each other home.
True.
And there's a lot of truth in that statement. My last question for you, people want to follow your journey, find out more about the Healing Recipe publication, get in touch with you. What's the best way for them to do that, Mark?
Yeah. So right now, the best way is I'm starting to post more on Instagram. I always joke because my wife is like, when did I marry an influencer? But I'm posting more on Instagram so people can find me there under my name, Mark Allen Ruegg. On my Instagram, I have a link to my Substack. I have a link to my healing recipe. If they want to know more, send me a DM. I do my best to try to communicate with everybody and anyone. And I'm more than happy to share my path with anybody who is interested. So yeah, that's it.
And I will make sure all of your contact information gets in the episode notes, when our episode goes live. So with that, Mark, thank you so much for just a great conversation today. Truly enjoyed it, and keep me posted on any new developments with you, because I'm sure we can figure out another podcast episode to go with that. So
I love it. I love it. We'll have a part 2 at some point, Dave. I look forward to it.
Me too. And with that, that's a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.